Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome. Hi, I'm Jesse Lazar. I'm the Executive Director here at AIA New York in the Center for Architecture. Welcome to the 2026 AIA New York Design Awards announcement and jury symposium here at the Center for Architecture. And a warm virtual hello to those who are joining us online. Thank you all for being here to celebrate the exceptional work submitted to this year's awards program. The AIA New York Design Awards recognize outstanding design across 4 broad categories: architecture, interiors, urban design, and projects, highlighting excellence, innovation, and the power of design to shape our world. This year, we received 208 eligible submissions, and we are proud to recognize 24 award recipients this evening across those categories. Congratulations to all the recipients. As we do every year, we are very pleased to bring you a moderated discussion of this year's distinguished jurors who have dedicated their time and expertise to reviewing a remarkable range of submissions from across the profession. It's been a very intense 2 days, and we really thank them for all of their work. Before we begin, I want to thank them and thank tonight's moderator, Jennifer Critchels, who's the editor-in-chief of our own Oculus magazine, and everyone who contributed to this year's awards process, including our Design Awards Committee, elected from among our members, who select this year's esteemed jury. I want to also thank Evelyn Serrano, who on our staff manages this whole process and was a great help to the jurors today. All of your commitment to design excellence is what makes not just this event tonight, but the program itself possible. So thank you. So without any further ado, let's get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesse. Hi, everyone. Can we just see who is here who submitted a project this year? Okay, great. Thank you. I'd just like to know. I'm Jen Critchels, and for me, as editor of Oculus, I sort of have an easy job here because these folks have been at it for 2 days with these submissions, and I just floated in a couple hours ago and got to hear their really great thoughts about the projects awarded this year. Like Jesse said, there are 24 winners this year. There will be an exhibition in May at which you'll see so many more beautiful photos and the full project credits. And additionally, this is where our work starts for Oculus. This will be the topic of our spring issue, which also goes to the Design Awards luncheon. And we will really get to dive into some of the great details of these projects. We'll try to discuss as much as possible tonight, but there's always things left unsaid and of course, beautiful photos that we'll get to visit in the magazine. So I am hoping the jury will introduce themselves and just say a little bit about their practice and how they are approaching the work today. Susan, we can start with you.
My name is Susan Jones. I'm the principal founding architect of Atelier Jones in Seattle, Washington. We've been focusing on resilient strategies for decarbonizing our built environment and specifically mass timber. I've spoken in this room a bit, so we look forward to seeing a lot of really amazing mass timber projects tonight that have come out of this jury process.
My name is Adam Ainsley. I'm an associate at a firm called Build Us in Washington, D.C. We focus on building with healthy, natural, and local materials and using a metaphor of food and cooking to communicate that to a broader public.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bree Hensold. I'm a principal and a co-founder of a firm called Agency Landscape and Planning up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We do public sector work, kind of at the seam of landscape and planning, and all of it has a really deep connection to community and community engagement. I also teach at the GSD.
Hello, my name is Maarten Gienen. I work for Halfwerk in Brussels, Belgium. And I'm mostly material focused, so I run a deconstruction company for 15 years, and now I'm working on reuse of steel and the potential that this has.
Whoa. Hi, everyone. My name is Kia Weatherspoon. I am the president and founder of Determined by Design based in Washington, D.C. We are the only interior design firm in the nation that provides our trademark design equity services, elevating the standard of design in Black and Brown communities, specifically in affordable, low-income, and transitional housing. And I'm excited to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christiana Moss. I'm founding principal and co-founder of Studio Ma. We're an architecture and planning firm. I'm actually a native New Yorker, but we but founded our practice in Phoenix, moved out there in 1997. And the desert has really informed our work and really changed the way that we look at the environment and natural systems and their effect, the effect architecture has on them. So that's really the lens that we viewed a lot of the work today.
Hi, I'm Jeff Kamuta, design director at Bird's Eye in Vermont. Even though I'm a native Vermonter, I lived and worked in New York. So I like to think that I've brought a bit of a balance of perspective of country and city living to the table. And Bird's Eye is a collective of builders, designers, and artisans. So I've been able to get a fair amount of building experience and shared knowledge under one umbrella sort of perspective to it as well. Looking forward to digging in.
Thank you all. Thank you for traveling from far and wide. It's so valuable to have your perspectives here, and also a lot of ties back to the city, as we'll discuss. So I think we should dive into presentation of the awards projects, and then we will end the night with a little more general discussion about the jury's approach to this year's entries. We're starting off with the projects category, which, there we are. And here we are. The projects category, I'll just explain, it's unbuilt work, speculative work, and we will kind of go back to your approach to this category specifically at the end, but we can right now dive into the first award, which is a merit for autonomous urbanism towards a new transition. And Martin, I think you're starting off with us.
Indeed. So we were intrigued by this project because autonomous vehicles are appearing on the streets, and they're going to impact how our cities are being built for sure. And what is interesting about this book is that it offers an analysis, but also a kind of a proposal on how to deal with it. That it's not something that we need to undergo as something that's sort of going to fall down upon designers and urban planners, but something that we can understand and plan for and integrate in the systems of a city, for instance, in a form of automated mass transit and so on. So the jury really liked sort of the optimism of trying to design these systems and not just undergoing these processes.
Susan, could you mention just the format of the book as well?
Yeah, kudos to the designer, the architect, the writer. It was a graphic novel involved. There's 2 volumes. You can't quite see it there, but one is the analysis and the maps and all the things that we would want, the rigor. But then there's this beautiful experience piece of what it feels like to be in an autonomous vehicle, and from different perspectives. And the graphic novel, I assume, was done by the author. I don't know for sure, but it was really a delight to peruse, and I want to buy it.
It'll be a fun one to get a hold of. All right, we'll move on to our next project. We have only 2 in this category. And here it's Exodus and Dance, a restoration at Kingsborough Houses. And Martin, you're discussing this. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Bree.
Thank you. So this one really, I think, defied categorization for the jury, but what was really clear was that we all loved it, and we're so thrilled that it had been brought back into existence. So the jury is really excited to give an honor award to this distinctive project that is so emblematic of NYCHA's longtime work stewarding and creating communities across the city. And the Exodus and Dance Restoration Project restores not just this kind of physical gateway moment at a housing development, but it also restores one of the nation's most significant WPA-era public works, and one of the few monumental sculptures installed in public housing by an African-American artist. So amidst all the kind of responsibilities and resource constraints that we know face housing agencies today. They chose the moment to hear the kind of sustained long-time advocacy for projects like this and to reinvest in the cultural identity of the site and to the broader history of Black art in New York City. The jury was also really impressed that the restoration itself had a really high quality of conservation techniques. It met really rigorous standards. It engaged the community, and it was built through a multi-sector partnership. We saw that its impact was broadened by the improvements that it made to expand accessibility and really improve the use of the plaza around it. So we want to thank the care and the contribution of so many people to invest in this place, in people, and in memories that surround it.
Kia, could you add a little about the project?
I think in a time where this idea of history and our stories and our narrative are so important, and also lost trades, this idea of preservation and stonework in these reliefs, I think we see this decline in technical trades around masonry, and the level of care and restoration here was really beautiful, but it was in a community that is often, they lack this type of attention to detail. So it was a very beautiful project, but also impactful around legacy, ancestry, and what the future of preservation should look like and the stories we should tell.
And this is a good time to mention you can go to the Center for Architecture website. You'll see detailed photos, more information. This is definitely one that deserves a closer look. So that's it for the projects category. And that takes us onto our urban design category, which is a little more self-explanatory. And I know, Adam, you're starting off talking about our first award, which is a citation for the Newhoff building in Nashville.
Yes, we were really excited by this urban reuse that celebrated reusing post-industrial spaces. It's a multi-block renovation of what had been abandoned for 50 years and was a slaughterhouse. And we thought that this really celebrated that history and brought it to the forefront, where it didn't have to be a kind of capital A architecture for that to become the protagonist in the space. And we talked a lot in the jury kind of generally about what histories do we engage with and how do we engage with them. And we thought that this was a particularly kind of innovative use of the history that was there becoming the identity of the place, and that it would really kind of uplift that portion of Nashville.
Because this is an urban design project, Bree, you could add something about the streetscape as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think we were also really impressed that this is a really comprehensive development project, and thinking about what it will do for the riverfront in Nashville, and be part of kind of a bigger story around the redevelopment and the transformation that's happening in that city, in its downtown, and especially along both sides of its rivers. You can go on the website and check out more photos where you'll see sort of how different and varied the project is across all of its facets. It's really mixed use, has a great retail component, and so it was really fun to see some of the kind of risk-taking and bold decisions people made with the adaptive reuse amidst a broader development project.
And Linda Miller says there's a great video of this project online as well. So next in the urban design category, we have the South Battery Park Resilience Project, and Bree, will stick with you.
Yeah, this is a really fun one to celebrate, and just to think about the kind of impact of this generational project that has really patiently and thoughtfully and beautifully come to fruition to protect New Yorkers for generations to come. The South Battery Resiliency Project demonstrates a really thorough and well-researched interdisciplinary approach that to the jury really embodied the best of urban design, something that was bringing together environmental challenges and community values in a multifaceted and we know really technically challenging solution. So we saw it as kind of a district scale solution that raised flood infrastructure to the level of a true community amenity, that worked at the urban and the site scale, that integrates environmental education and touches communities, and that really planned ahead thoughtfully in what it showed to tie into other phases of work beyond its edges. The submission was lovely to read and great storytelling, and it showed a real care within a dedicated design team to think critically about flood infrastructure, different typologies, and how to adapt them within a tightly constrained urban space. Those solutions really drew attention to creative ideas for a program of open space, how people could use it, to integrating with Thomas Pfeiffer's pavilions, and to kind of seamlessly create an experience where you are protected, but you can also enjoy the everyday water's edge. So we want to thank the team for this important work and are excited to see it beloved in years to come.
Christiana, I think you had some next.
And the team is here.
Yeah, I just want to add that at post Sandy, it's incredible to see the city doing so much. I mean, obviously, this has been years in the making, and I think it's so important for New York to continue to invest and make these investments in its resilience through infrastructure projects like this that are truly joyful, and also to make sure that they're as kind of, I would say, regenerative as possible in terms of the natural environment. So we're really excited about, I think the jury was all excited about seeing future projects like this emerge. So yeah, it's an amazing project.
Yes, we'll come back to this idea of projects for now and projects for the future, because that seems to be a recurring theme tonight. Well, that's the end of the urban design category as well. We're moving right along to interiors. And we'll start with Kia on this first one. Very mysterious manifest in Washington, D.C.
Bree told me I had to say it as we discussed it in the jury room. This project is a vibe. It's a vibe. It's in Washington, D.C. It's in the Northeast Corridor, in a gentrifying neighborhood that still needs cultural heritage. And it's a mixed-use retail concept with a speakeasy, a restaurant, a barber shop, a coffee shop and cafe, and then also a restaurant component. And what we really loved, one, it is also a men's barbershop and men's wellness and retail. And you see this necessity to really elevate the care of men. I can't believe I said that out loud, but I mean it.
It's on the record.
I think this idea of self-care and what that means to cater to a male demographic is still a necessity, especially in a city like Washington, D.C. It is very well done and it's beautiful, and it brings just great color and story and sexiness and care around men's wellness, men's health. I've actually been there. It's very beautiful. So it was a vibe. It was a vibe.
And just from the immersive architectural experience quality, I haven't been there, so I can't really speak to it. But this photo, just like, of course, it's just beautiful. Just to sense what it feels like to walk in. The command of light, space, and detail is really, in a quiet way, the essence of architecture.
Do you want to weigh in, Martin?
No, I'm waiting for the next one.
Was it a vibe?
I will say the photos of this
well.
project are especially beautiful. We'll go on to our next merit winner, this sculpting history exhibition.
Yeah,
Martin.
so this is one the jury felt very strong about. It's a relatively small project. It's an exhibition that takes place in the former studio of Edward Valentine, a sculptor whose work celebrates Southern racist ideology. So very problematic work to exhibit, and the exhibition design is super clever in the sense that the sculptures are being stored behind a screen, and you can only see them when they are lit up from the back. So the exhibition design kind of takes control over the power that these sculptures have, and inserts them in a narrative device that is an audio device supported by other exhibits that are on the tables in front of it. So I think there's not a museum in the world that doesn't have one form or another these kind of problematic pieces that you cannot just exhibit as if they were Beaux-Arts masterpieces for their materiality or technicity, but you don't also want to just put them in the basement and forget about this. And here they are really being used to bring an important story in the history of the United States, for sure, and in a very controlled manner. So a very, like, a relatively small project, but that we find is exemplary for a lot of the work that our institutions need to be doing.
And if you could want to talk about the opposite of care of story and, you know, mostly male bust in this actual exhibition, I think there's a protection to the viewer, to the exhibitor, and how they show this work, and not necessarily highlighting the problematic nature. But I think we just saw another project that was talking about the care of man, but the care of our history. So I think it's a great juxtaposition of two interiors projects.
And you'll notice that we gave the introduction to this project to the foreigner on the jury. I think it's really important as, you know, Americans that we own this history and that we own it in the most careful and qualitative and thoughtful way possible. And I think for me, this project was an absolute premiated project from the beginning because of the skill of the designer and the imagination of the designer to bring the power of light and sound and story and darkness together. And if you didn't have all of those moments at the one point in time, you didn't know anything. And I think that's an incredible mastery of some small, delicate, technical cooperatives that make this project absolutely a beautiful illumination on our difficult history as Americans.
Could you just briefly explain the auditory aspect of the project?
Yeah, Martin actually explained it quite well, but I'll use it in just different words. So you're walking through, you have to have audio. You can't, it's not optional. You have to have audio. And so you're standing in front of a dark scrim. And unless you're listening in synchronicity to the actual point about that actual bust statue, you don't know anything. You can't see anything and you can't hear anything. But when you click on, then the story starts and then the light comes from the bust. So then you're allowed to see it. This is the element of control that Martin mentioned. You're allowed to see it in context of the story and not, oh, isn't that a really handsome man from the 19th century? That is really well sculpted and that's cool sculpture. You have to understand the depth of what that man and his history, his own personal history represented. And I think it's a simple move and we all like, oh, well, duh, of course that would be a great idea. It's not a duh, and we know how hard that is. It's really a beautiful project. I really have to hand it to Wendy Joseph, whom I don't know, but she did a beautiful job.
So we'll move on to the last in the interiors category, a project we probably, many of us know. Jeff will talk more about.
Yes, it's one that doesn't really need much introduction. It's obviously an icon in New York. And this is one that would be great to have two photos because it's really got a duality to its nature. They were tasked with two separate sort of scopes where one was an upgrade to the theater that you see here to really make it a more performative space. And they had some very clever moves, all based on making this space really perform at the highest level, but also integrating a lot of these moves into the second part of the scope, which was about really reintroducing this institution to the city and opening it up to the public. And so inside the theater, that meant deleting the proscenium, moving the stage forward, bringing people behind the stage, really making the expression of art accessible to the public. And then in the lobby experience and the expression of the building to the city, they increased that square footage by 2 and really created a living room-esque moment for the city to feel like they had this clear, accessible connection to the artistic experience. So we really thought that the project successfully accomplished both of those scopes in a beautiful way. It had a beautiful, refined material and sort of texture to it. And ultimately, I think the project really elevated the hall as sort of democratic public space and really invited it to be open, welcoming, and oriented toward this idea of collective civic life as the real performance of the space itself. So it's a really impressive piece of work.
That's another theme we'll come back to, this civic life and how many of these projects consider it in the modern day. Well, that's it for our interiors category. So we'll move right on to architecture, which has more projects. And let's see, Adam, you're starting off with the Storm King Art Center.
Yes. So we gave a citation for the sensitivity to landscape and art. And what this project is, we're seeing right here a photo of the new bathroom. It also includes a kind of maintenance facility and a new ticketing entrance. And what we thought was kind of really special about this was the way in which the architecture and the design fit the institution, where here you see the kind of like literal removal of the building to put the focus out into the landscape and out to the art. So we thought that this was a really kind of sensitive way to add to a space. And speak to the institution and prime the visitors in a kind of intuitive way as to what's important, where the architecture kind of takes a back seat and the ego of the architect takes a back seat. I think it's something we'll talk about a little bit more. But I think the kind of like subtle, sensitive way in which this added to the space while also solving the kind of important functional problems was we were excited by that.
We were talking in the jury room how the photo of the bathroom may be seen as an unusual choice, but it actually just indicates how many beautiful details are included in this project and in sort of ordinary spaces.
Yeah, totally. It's such a humble piece of a building to give so much attention to. And I think that the kind of crux of the project you can see just in that one moment there.
The architect is taking away the building to highlight the experience. And I think that was really genius, as well as making it cheaper because you're not building an exterior envelope around that because it's unconditioned space. So it was brilliant on multiple levels.
Thank you. We're moving on to Kia again with, I think, this evening's only single family residence.
Yeah, there
award.
was a big conversation around the inclusion or of single family homes. And this is, I believe, the only one. And we didn't get there lightly. But I think what we gravitated to was one, the carbon zero, net zero. They maintain the existing footprint. But this idea of family and what does it mean to connect your family back to nature and do so responsibly to Mother Earth, for them to be able to maintain the original footprint and not interrupt their surroundings. It was just very well done. And it was very thoughtful. And we all kind of came up with a story about the family fleeing post-COVID and homeschooling their kids. But I think what was beautiful there, you could see your family there and that necessity for connecting your children back to nature for generations to come. And it was just, there's some other really great photos, but also this kind of the sustainability of this single family home was very, very impressive. One all electric, giving back more to the grid. You do that better.
There was a lot of discussion about this house, and one of the things that really pushed it to me toward the edge was, first of all, it was built on an existing site, which made a big difference, but also the PVs, and of course we talk a lot about PVs, but they really do power the house, and there's battery storage that allows off-the-grid living around the year. And I think that is really important, and it is an element of resilience that all of our buildings can aspire to with our all-electric appliances or infrastructure within the houses, and as well battery storage. So for me, I was okay with it.
You have another mic here. Like, yeah, you had such a nice comment too about not wanting to boil it down to a post-COVID reaction, but some larger indication about nature.
I think you're seeing a lot of people gravitating and moving towards nature, whether that is this emergence of homestead, urban farming. I think to just say like, oh, this is a COVID reaction. Yes, I think that might have sparked it, but you see people really wanting to connect to their nature and their food source with much more intentionality. And I don't think that's an access or a privilege thing. I think it's really about how we care for ourselves in the world nowadays, where I think there's care and nurturing, and nature plays a huge part of that, and how we preserve nature and how we need it to fuel our souls moving forward. So yeah.
And I can't remember who made this comment, but we're seeing this reinvestment in nature even in the urban context, and I mean throughout many of these projects. I think
you see a lot of these again. We're working on this fresh food concept corner store where it's an urban farmer, this Black woman named Krista Barfield, and it's about food and access as a form of medicine. Like food is medicine, nature is medicine, and how do we see that both in more rural settings, but also in cityscapes. And we saw some other urban design projects that were really looking at bringing urban farms in large urban design projects. So I think that's a really critical component. A part of architecture as well, because I think there was a farm on this existing land. So I think it's really critical.
I will plug the feature in Oculus fall issue about urban food farming. We'll move on to our next project, which is another citation. Kia will stay
Another
with you.
Kia favorite. We talked a lot about the ego in architecture and this hearkening back to humanity and restraint. When you go to the website and you look at the facade of this building, it's controversial for many reasons because they maintained it as is. And this is a perfect example of how building materials and architecture, it can do the work of impact. This is a passive, both internationally. Yep, go ahead. That's my technical friend over there. She got me.
You got it, girl.
Go.
475, just quick, is a building supply for passive house. And what's important is about this is it's an amazing dual passive house and PFIAS, which is pretty remarkable. But back to you, Kia, because you got it.
So again, we were conflicted. Like, is this an architecture project? Is this an interiors project? They didn't touch the facade. But I think there was intentionality there of not touching the facade. And we talked a lot about gentrification in Brooklyn, old Brooklyn versus new Brooklyn. And this was really about the building materials, bringing in natural daylight to the company that was in inadequate spaces for 2 decades. And they finally decided to bring light, sustainability in a way that was just very, very thoughtful in a small scale and compact space. It really wasn't about ego. It was really about impact and saying, this is what we do and this is how you do it. So I thought it was very, very beautiful.
Yeah, I just want to add that as a jury, we also kind of looked regularly at the budgets, and we really appreciated projects that were doing a lot with a very small budget, and this is one of them. It's easy when the budget is unlimited and you have perfect conditions and the perfect client. Here it's a very tough,
cost effective.
Yeah, in a tough place to do something that has this much natural daylight and so on and so on.
And we talked about, is it interiors or not? But we were steadfast in it maintaining in the architecture category.
So we'll move on to project some of you may remember as the tunnel, but Jeff will introduce it as I should change the slide, the terminal warehouse.
Terminal warehouse. Yes, it's got a long storied past going back to 1891. Critical piece of infrastructure in the city on the west side. And yes, some of you may remember it as the Tunnel Nightclub. It's gone through many iterations over the years. And so we saw this project as sort of a continuation of a story that's been going on for a long time with adaptive reuse. And we appreciated the restraint here, but also the intentionality behind a lot of the moves. So it was a really skillful renovation to preserve and continue to use this landmark, which has taken on so many lives that it's bound to just continue this legacy as it moves forward. And so it's now mixed use with an office space above, and the tunnel is continuing to be used. And so repositioning this warehouse as sort of a durable piece of the urban fabric to preserve and continue to be enlivened by public life. And also, this photo doesn't show it, but they drilled a big courtyard in the middle to then provide more usability to the large floor plates. So we just really appreciated being able to root this building in history while also clearly orienting it towards the future and giving it a continuation of its very vibrant life.
Do you want to say anything about the structural flexibility of some of these older buildings that we're seeing find new life?
Yeah, I think we struggled with a lot of these projects where I think there's a conversation obviously occurring in cities with the adaptation of typologies and typologies either becoming irrelevant or more in pressing need. And how cities and architects respond to that is a critical question right now. We had a lot of fruitful debate about projects that took very different approaches to that question, but we appreciated the projects that really tried to highlight and I think celebrate that historical lineage of development rather than trying to mask or make new intervention invisible. I think that contrast is an important thing to preserve, to give a story to a building. And in this case, there was a lot of preservation of existing structural elements. There was many different structural systems used in the building. And I think that sort of rich layered history is what really makes this such an iconic piece of infrastructure in the city fabric. So by continuing that legacy and that story, I think it just continues to make these types of buildings more important to preserve.
Refresh my mind.
Martin brought the European perspective once again, and really the notion of historic preservation and adaptive reuse, but still preserving the qualities of the historic building. You were very eloquent at some point in the jury, and while there's a variety of structural systems in here, and they really helped reveal all of them, including the historic heavy timber that was used in the building.
And some nostalgia for the days of the tunnel.
Well, we're moving on to our next merit winner, which is the Studio Museum in Harlem.
Yeah. Did I hear whoop? All right now. I think we felt like as a jury, this project was very impactful. It was Black, super Black, literally and figuratively. It impacted the community. It immersed the community into art that was for everybody. It was about access. There's this beautiful picture where it talks about we, it says we and me, and it just really just exemplified what this project was about for Harlem and for this community, and centering the arts and culture in a project that these projects take time. But it was just very well done. We talked about, even from the kind of architectural vernacular, Jeff talked about it, had this rhythm. There's this rhythm to this story. There's this rhythm to this building. There's this beautiful staircase on the interior that Susan will talk about. But there was strength here. There was preservation here. It was just done well, and a job well done for a community that deserved it.
We talked a lot about this building, and it wasn't an easy discussion always, and it wasn't a simple decision either. I think what really convinced us all was, first of all, the impact of the community, as Kia so beautifully spoke. But really, from my perspective, when I witnessed those lobby photos, incredibly rendered materiality, incredible, beautiful blackness and brownness of that wood natural staircase rising. It was just, we know the architect, we know the talents. It was a glorious, glorious execution of a lobby. And I think that's really important to present a public face for a community that knows what its power is and knows what its beauty is potentially capable of. And I was really thrilled that it was in Harlem and made a contribution to this city.
And I think there was this contrast around like these stark white buildings that we saw, and then we saw something the complete opposite, and we were like, wait a second. It's striking but poignant, and it tells a beautiful story.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next merit winner here, the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra building.
Yeah, so the jury was really just, I think, inspired by this project because context around St. Louis, it's one of the cities that is somewhat in decline. And to have a historic theater like this, it's so important to the city in Powell Hall. Having the architects really celebrated things that are often hidden, and the kind of lyricism of music expressing it literally on the exterior, taking inspiration from the prosceniums who, there's so much articulation and wonderful, beautiful stuff inside, and literally expressing it outside, inverting that situation. Of course, drawing inspiration from historic architecture, but also St. Louis arches, having a lot of fun with that, and solving a real programmatic challenge. Most, performing arts centers, you need more programmatic space. They need to bring in more income. They need to kind of relate to their communities better. And they did all of this really expertly and beautifully with a tremendous amount of expression and joy and true love and care for this place.
Susan, you had some nice thoughts about the idea of the proscenium.
Christiana really echoed it, and she was the one who sparked it in the discussion of our jury. Is that, but it didn't occur to me till I looked at this that it is, until she said this, till this is a proscenium from the inside, from this audience to this stage. We've all seen theaters, since we were tiny, but this is a proscenium from the city to the arts, and I think that was a really beautiful, simple idea, which until you articulated it, Christiana, I hadn't really figured it out, and I was like, okay. I think that's a really, really brilliant design move. It's great.
So another merit award here is the Lopez Playground Modular Comfort Station.
So this is also one that I think we all thought was a really beautiful, simple idea, but more so than that, we saw it as a project that solved kind of a really significant problem today everywhere. And in fact, if you're a park and recreation agency, probably the number one issue that you face on a day-to-day basis. So we saw this project really taking on a hard challenge that many people have not solved for decades of how do you provide comfort, rest, and space in a cost-effective, replicable way across many parks within a system. This was really kind of a project that to us considered the needs not just of a single place, but of caregivers, of children, of the maintenance workers who have to take care of parks in these spaces, of the parks and recreation agencies themselves, of the unhoused community, and really gave a way for a lot of people to stay, to play, to linger, to visit public spaces much longer than they could otherwise. So we were really excited to see this as not just a single project, but as a prototype. So this is really proof of concept for a system that is modular, can be erected in a day, and is planned to be implemented across a much broader system, and I think could be inspiration, not just here, but across the country. So we hope that this becomes something that can be a model all over. Any other thoughts?
I was telling the jury that from an editorial perspective, we are talking about bathrooms just so much more in our work. They're just an indication of how we treat people. And I think this idea of people and, we'll circle back to how projects can touch individuals in this really meaningful way at a basic level.
Yeah, this was a great submission. I think that really showed us kind of a lot of diagrams for the construction and the care given to that modular system, the decisions that the team made about sustainability, that they made to control costs, and that they made this to be a successful project. We love that it was imageable too, really clear and identifiable with the successful brand of the New York City parks. And so there was, although a small project, just a tremendous amount of care to the diagrams, how they showed it, and how they implemented it.
Thank you. We have another merit award. This is the Honan Arts Hub in Colorado Springs.
So this is a very beautiful story that begins in the 1960s with covering a lawn that was used as a skating rink in winter. Then in the 80s, they close up this building, insulate it a little bit, and it becomes a permanent skating rink for the college. Until 2023, where it falls out of use, and the school decides to reuse it as manufacturing and display space for the arts department. So I think what this shows is that it's sort of a very positive architectural story where an object that was carefully designed in the 60s, even though it's in a very cheap material, being concrete, was deemed valuable enough to sort of go through the process of rethinking it. So it shows that the initial design was smart, and what we also appreciated is that here there's a certain restraint in the design that is being used. In the sense that we still see that canopy, and even in the interior design, like the louder parts of the workshop are grouped together so that you need to build less infrastructure in the quieter parts, so that more of the structure and more of the space can remain visible. It's also an ultimately very reversible intervention. We can easily think of this going back to being a sort of a canopy or a concert hall at a later point. So it's like treating this structure almost as if it was furniture that is being handed down, and everybody takes good care of it. And that's a very interesting way of looking at the built environment.
I think just like how much you can do with paint, it was pretty inspiring.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a beautiful quote in the project description, saying that the project argues that architecture is not static, but must constantly adapt to new needs, uses, and ideas. And I think that's something that the jury can absolutely underwrite.
We should call out the original architects, who you say are Lusk and Wallace. Is that right?
Lusk and Wallace,
right.
It is.
Well done. Bless you. We'll move on to the next Merit Award winner. This is the Garden House at Packer Collegiate Institute.
Yes, not a house. I think that could be hopefully obvious. This is a school building. It's part of a campus plan that was built out a couple years ago. This is the first kind of built project of that larger plan. I think what's amazing about this is that you don't necessarily see its innovation right off the bat, but materially this is a heavy timber building, CLT and glulam, and clad in what is mostly recycled brick material. So it's doing a lot with these materials that we know to be beneficial for the projects of the 21st century. I think one of the themes that we talked about as a group was, what's the difference between a good building or a good building from the 20th century versus what are the problems for us to engage with in the 21st century? And we thought that the way in which this dealt with materials and connected to the existing building and the broader campus did that all really subtly and sensitively, kind of like the other project by this firm. So it's a really exciting way to think about the future of materiality.
Thank you. I think you said it all. Oh, who's next? No, Susan is speaking about the next Merit Award winner, which is Frame 122 Apartments.
So another really similarly modest project that is kind of hides its glory, because the superstructure, which is, yes, mass timber all inside and sort of revealed only at the door there. But it's also a beautiful project of how we can regenerate new projects for the 21st century, as Adam just said. It takes a lot. It takes not just an architect who's skilled, who this in case was, but really a design team and a development team. The frame house, the developer for this project, they've been working with mass timber for now 2 projects. They really set themselves a will in stone to make this work in wood. And I think that's a really powerful thing. We are all taking risks to do these new technologies, to do these new things that we believe are best for a regenerative future of architecture. And it's not a simple decision. It's not just an architect convincing somebody. It's a whole ecosystem that we all need to be part of and developing. The project itself is simple. It's 15 units, 2 and 3 bedroom units, apartment units. There's a big courtyard in the middle. It's well detailed. The interior units are beautiful, just gorgeous, and full of nature and living in biophilia, and the beauty of living with wood in the city on the site of a former parking garage of Brooklyn is just a fabulous story, and kudos to the whole team for doing that.
I think it's a celebration of simple things done really well, which is something that we liked a lot in many of the projects.
We have our next merit award winner, which many of us have interacted with, the Disney headquarters.
Yeah, so we reviewed as a jury a few corporate headquarters, and this one immediately rose to the top. It truly does redefine what a commercial development should be in the city, densifying dramatically, but in a human way too. It allows really a kind of beautiful massing and scale, and for people to really interact with its mass and with its scale, bringing people, elevating people up, and interacting in such a responsible way. Its facade is just one of the most sensual facades I think I've experienced. I've pet this building on my way here several times. Oh, a few of you saw me do that, but it is just gorgeous. And I think it talks about its relationship in the brief to Hudson Square and kind of stone and brick. But really, there's something it's ephemeral and visceral about the connection maybe to the legacy of cast iron buildings in the city, and almost like a nostalgia that it shimmers with nostalgia, if I can say that. And even so far as to say that I'm imagining kind of what its future will be at the retail. It's the only place where it's falling short at the moment. And I would just implore this architect to kind of inspire the client to make the most whimsical, immersive experience out of those windows. Like, if you remember what Macy's used to mean for the city, like, what could window dressing for Disney and in the city be, right? So I would just implore you to please try to inspire them to do something magical, which I'm sure they will eventually around the perimeter of this building. But it's just gorgeous.
That's good. We like that kind of provocation for everybody.
I think, you've also seen a lot of housing projects, and we know as a jury how critical housing is across the country. Also here, that it's a crisis, and housing production should be one of the things we're focused on the most. But I think we're also really excited to see the development of a really strong project about jobs within Manhattan and workplaces that people would want to be in, and that would be a great place to be all times of day. And so having that balance across the jobs and the housing was really an important discussion.
Yeah, and I think too, digging a little deeper, adaptability was a huge theme too for these dense projects. How adaptable will they be in the future? We prodded and really went into that. And this is an incredibly adaptable project. We think it could be converted, say, okay, eventually, you have this, Disney moves, you can do something beautiful with it in the future. And that's something just, that a project can really patina and grow and really be adapted over time is something that it really stands up to too.
So we have one more merit award in this category. It's the Brown University Residence Hall.
So, longevity, speaking of beauty, some of the buildings that last the longest because they're beautiful, and it's hard to say that Disney is not, because it is. Beauty does really add for longevity, which means it's not going to be torn down in 20, 50, 30 years. And I can't call this traditionally beautiful, but this is a very classic, very simple, very quiet building that serves an incredible purpose on a campus in Providence, Rhode Island at Brown University. 353 beds, 2, 3, 4 kids beds per unit, creating community for upper division students that are living together, and they're not moving out into apartments in Providence. They're staying here in a lovely community on the campus, so they're not putting pressure on market rate units outside the campus. It's very simple, and I really have to hand it to Brown University and Ten Burke Architects for really embracing the mass timber. It's a hybrid system. It's all electric building. It's just a complete package in my mind of a building that we should be building, ideally post and beam, but for the 21st century. And really the simplicity, the durability of these materials, the gravitas and the way it sits in the campus and in Providence. A very simple, strong building, 125,000 square feet, no small impact on our carbon footprint. And shout outs to the architects and the client.
Susan, hold on to that microphone, unless somebody else wants to weigh in on this project. We'll go to our first honor in the architecture category, which is the new theater at Jacob's Pillow.
Okay, I get all the easy ones. I feel really grateful. I mean, we hardly talked about this project because everybody wanted the project. It was like from the very most moment we walked into the room, the whole jury had said, this is the one. So we didn't really talk about it. So it wasn't until I actually went back today and was looking in more depth, I feel sort of foolish, like the rich history of this project. This project burned down in 2020, and it was on indigenous lands at Jacob Pillow, which is not an environment that I'm that personally familiar with. But they brought an indigenous consultant, Jeffrey Gibson, onto the project to help reinterpret the stories that issues of reclamation of land after a burned building, after a taken building. You can just take that back several millennium and understand the gravitas of rebuilding on a site that's been destroyed. Our practice has done work on fire-destroyed sites, and it's traumatic. It's traumatic, it's hard, it's very, very difficult to reclaim that joy and vitality and living ferocity that students of dance have. And the pictures on this of the students dancing on that upper green roof are absolutely beautiful. And I don't need to mention that it is a mass timber project, but it is, and it's a real mass timber project, and there's a lot of it. And what that means to me is that you're living in nature, and you're performing in nature, and you're existing in nature. And the building is in nature. So it's a really beautiful, beautiful honor award, and we were really thrilled to award it to a very complex set of architects too. I mean, it doesn't mention the indigenous consultant, but Mekanu was the lead design architect. Marvel architects, brilliant architects from New York City, architects of record. Just a complex set of collaborative relationships, which again, I think it was you that mentioned, Kia, no ego or lower ego. Yeah, and I really think that's the measure of success in our profession for the 21st century. It's another value that, yes, we all could do better at, including yours truly.
Thank you. And I think that's a good time to mention ego or no ego, but all of the consultants and the many contributors to these projects will be very well credited at the exhibition, which I think is opening May 7th. We'll verify that, but yes, and in the magazine. So we have our next, thank you, Jesse, also water delivery. We have our next honor award winner here. We'll hear from Christiana about this project.
This was my favorite project. It is my favorite project. I have to just say that in terms of just our democracy, I'll just put it out there, this is inspiring. It's incredibly inspiring project. The more I learn about it, the more I recognize how difficult it was to achieve. And so this is actually a mix of library and housing. And when they did the outreach with the community, they found that there were just a lot of needs in this community in Inwood. And so, there's actually integrated pre-K for all, like basically a pre-K program. They had an ACTS program for job training that was integrated into it. STEM training for high school students after school, and 174 affordable units, and 16% of those for the formerly unhoused. So just astounding what was able to be achieved here. And the architecture is so incredibly, I would say, precise and elegant and beautiful. Extremely simple palette, but expert use of proportion and scale and materiality with the terracotta inserts and this beautiful verticality that's created spatially. And really a beautiful, complex spatial beautiful relationship to the street, double height space. I mean, it's such a generous, caring project. It's just remarkable. Incredibly adaptable as well in terms of the floor plate. And I just think the hope really is that the city, there should be one of these in every neighborhood. I guess that's what I want to say. We need one of these in every single neighborhood. And I know these are challenging projects that demand absolute creativity and innovation from the city and from all the entire team that put this together. But this deserves an incredible amount of recognition because it is hopefully the future of New York.
Speaking of projects that will and have already done a lot for the community, we have our next honor, which is the Davis Center at the Harlem Mir.
Yes, I was excited to take this one on. I did my thesis in Central Park, so I spent many a late night reading maps and learning the storied history about the park. And as many of you know, the park's north end hasn't gotten the attention it deserves over the years. So to see a project like this come to life and rejuvenate and reconnect to that neighborhood is really an incredible achievement. I think one other piece that we really appreciated about this was that the architecture took a bit of a backseat to allow the park itself to be really the main character in the story, as well as just the vibrant sort of public activity that takes place. It's really a platform for life. And by reseeding the building and really restoring the ecology and the Olmsted Vox intentions that were originally designed in the 19th century, I think this project accomplishes so many things by trying to respect the past, be mindful of its ecological impact, and be very intentional with its public outreach. We just thought it was a sort of perfect example of what architecture can achieve in this type of environment. It's also not an easy undertaking as a designer to work in Central Park and make an impactful difference on something that is arguably the most important public space in the world. But I think the project kind of speaks for itself in its ability to be flexible and adaptable. It's meant to change with the seasons. It's meant to be, as I mentioned, a platform for public life, so it can be many things at once. So it works very hard, but ultimately it allows the landscape to be at center stage. So it's a really beautiful project and an incredible achievement.
We featured this project on the cover of the fall issue, and we're joking we could easily put an image of the skating rink on the cover of the winter issue, and it would be filling a totally different role in the park. So it's ice rink, yes. So we'll stay with Jeffrey for a presentation of the next honor, the Book Tower in Detroit.
Moving to the Midwest. Yeah, this project, I really hope that the architects write a book about the process in the end, because no pun intended, but the project, from what we understand, is extremely extensive, and it was really a sort of act of detective work as well as design work, because this project is a 1926 Louis Camper building, and it had fallen into disrepair, and Bedrock purchased it in, I believe, 2015, and made the bold decision to do a complete renovation and really restore this icon back to life. And there's another project where I wish we had another image, but there's an amazing glass domed skylight inside, which I encourage you to go on and Google the project to see some more images of it. But the story that was told was how meticulously and painstakingly that dome was restored, because there were very few drawings. It had basically been bombed out over the years. There was very little left, and they were able to three-dimensionally model the whole thing, figure out how to rebuild it, and it's ultimately now just this absolutely stunning piece of craftsmanship. So beyond the actual renovation process itself, I think it goes without saying there's a much larger story here for Detroit, and by taking on this project and Bedrock really pushing this project, they're sending a pretty strong message about the future of Detroit and the future of these types of architectural icons, and really allowing this project to be kind of an emblematic symbol of a forward progress that's occurring there. And by creating a mixed use program, it really will enliven this building with public life, and allow it to continue to serve a really important function in the city. So we just thought it was a really amazing example of what can be done in this space of restoring architectural icons, and what kind of impact they can have in their larger urban context.
And Jeff really spoke really beautifully about this project, but I think it bears to be said that there were many, many projects that were submitted, and that many that were in New York that also had this level of commitment to restoring civic landmark buildings of this quality. And we made a kind of one decision to, just because we were sort of blown away by that skylight, but we could have permeated a number of them. And it's a real act of generosity. And I really want to emphasize that, as Jeff said, about this particular site and building. But it's an act of generosity to restore any building of this nature. It's incredibly technically difficult. It's not necessarily fun, glamorous work. And when you finish, it looks just the same as it always did when it opened. And it's like, okay, cool. But it's really hard, and it's really costly, and it really needs to be done, because we're saving history, we're saving culture, and we're saving carbon. So thank you for all of you involved in those kind of works.
Our next honor is at the University of Pennsylvania.
Okay, so the jury thought that this building, which is actually a research facility for AI, was remarkably human and beautifully biophilic. And it's another wonderful mass timber building on a campus. And it does everything right. It really does, from its planning to the integration of pretty much every sustainable measure you could imagine, including natural ventilation, biophilia, which is just beautifully expressed throughout, both in form and also materiality, really targeting its decarbonization, which is 70% lower than a typical building on a campus, and just doing everything right, truly. Spatially, this project is incredibly elegant. The way it situates itself, it's very accessible. There is this kind of implied porch. There's a double height space, and the spatial kind of layering of different spaces that happens through it. This is the frontal view. Again, it's hard to describe these projects when you only have one image, but there's a kind of intersection of double height spaces that it plays with very beautifully, and also this kind of, I would say, in a way, you can visually see where the air goes just in terms of the section. It traces, in a way, the way that natural ventilation circulates through the building. So it's really impressive and really gorgeously executed. So we love this project too.
Beautiful. Well, I should have said that's our last honor of the evening. Those are the 24 projects that are being awarded this year. And we will go on to have a more general discussion. But first, anyone who was involved in any of the projects, I think you should stand up, and we will clap for you. Thank you so much. Not to make you do any more work, but I just have a few more questions. And since we're ending on this project that is built for the research of AI, I just wanted to kind of jump into the middle with one observation, which is that we don't have projects in this collection that are unbuilt. We, in the projects category, we have a book and a relief sculpture. Can you talk a little bit about that decision and sort of maybe that will illustrate your workings as a jury?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the age of AI has made the unbuilt work even more challenging. So I just want to say that it's going to become more and more difficult. I think focusing on research, like hard research, and kind of advocacy, right? And how architects are actually doing other kinds of work to be able to actually execute all of the work you see here. I'd like to personally see more of that coming to the fore instead of just sexy images, because sexy images, like, right, AI is going to do them for us. So we have to, reinstate our professional existence very clearly and do that with force. And so I would just say, let's focus on the hard things because we can get them done as architects, and we're probably in the best position to do that.
You used the term, this project's category is going to become more rigorous. Can you talk a little bit more about that word?
Yeah, so I think a kind of rigor and expectation. We have, as we all know, increasing, like we have big problems, right? And I think this jury was incredibly inspired to give the awards that we did because in every way, every project that we selected is solving a problem, right? And I think design, we know, can solve these problems, and architects are in incredible situations to do so. And not only reading the Framework for Design Excellence, which is truly about care and generosity, ultimately, we just have to take that seriously. And I think increasingly that kind of rigor is what's going to advance design and advance the kind of status of our profession overall, and to become more vocal about it, more visible about it, and to increasingly really advocate for the difficult things that need to be done in our society to be able to make these things happen in our democracy. So yeah, that requires rigor, and it requires courage, and it requires leadership. So I think we just need to do all of that in our profession.
Well said. Backing up to 48 hours ago or whenever you met each other, it's obvious you had an instant chemistry as a group. This is a larger jury than we have had in the last couple of years, but can you elaborate on how you came to a consensus about how to approach this group?
I mean, we had a very robust discussion. There was a lot of yelling in positive ways. There was not yelling at one another. There was just, this is important, yelling kind of stuff. And I really shout out to Kia. I mean, you really started the volume, and I mean that in a positive way. And I think I might not have had the courage to have the volume if I hadn't started it. But then we engaged with the volume. And then Martin comes along. He's the foreigner. I mean, he's from Brussels. He didn't even want to come to the US. He was scared. I don't blame the poor guy. We had to apologize to him multiple times for what is going on. I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. But we had to reassure him that we were actually good humans and thoughtful humans and cared and people. And then there was the diversity of the urban design. And I'll say the young academics, sorry, Adam, I know you're much more than that. And then the New Yorkers that really set us, grounded us in this place. And it was an amazing jury. So we all had our things, but we had some thoughts. That you couldn't just do a good project, and you dang well couldn't do a good 20th century project. And there were a lot of them. There is some beautiful, beautiful, well-designed, well-built projects that are designed under the rubrics of the 20th century. And we asked more again and again and again. And we threw out good 20th century projects again and again and again. And that's really hard to say to this room. But the projects that we premiated, we believe to our hearts, these represent a future. The architecture of the future, the architecture of now. We don't have time to design future projects. We need to design the future now. And that's what we believe these projects represent in multiple different ways. And we just shout out to this community and to all of us as architects, as professionals in this country, to do more of designing the future now. So thank you for the opportunity. It was glorious.
I would just piggyback on both of your comments. In reflecting on the last 48 hours in the projects, we talked about this before, but I think there was a couple common themes for me, and it has to do with this sort of idea behind unbuilt work, and this sort of confronting a reality and confronting the problems of the day, and especially confronting the problems we have in our backyard. And I think for me, there was a couple themes. One of this idea of repair and taking problems and really doing the hard work to repair something. And whether that's repairing a fabric of a major public space or literally repairing a building back to life, I thought that was a really powerful theme. And the other one was just this idea of, in this post-COVID world where we've kind of been forced apart, there was a lot of this reinvigorating community and reinvigorating public space and really focusing on that as a new thing to really bring us back together. I think David Geffen Hall's a great example of that, and there's many others of just really prioritizing that and focusing on human beings and allowing community to really be a driver of, I think we all talked about this, of a real sense of optimism, and that being a real driver for what architecture is capable of and design is capable of, and something that we're all in desperate need of at the moment. So I think that was a big driver for me.
You used the phrase at one point, confronting reality, which I think many of these projects do very well. And then, Kia, I wanted to circle back to you. My husband's here. He knows I love a semantic argument. But this idea of people-scaled work.
I think oftentimes we use these words that disconnect us for who we serve, the end user, human scale, but we are really in the business of people. And people are what makes up communities. And I think, yeah, it's semantics, but I want to be more connected to who I'm serving. So I have to see them as a mother, a sister, a wife, a husband, a brother. And when we use this language that disconnects us, I think we forget what our responsibility is. And I think architecture, it's a lot of ego. And I challenge you to tap back into the humanity of who you are building communities for. And you are of service for the greater good. And we talked a lot about, we don't need another, you talked about power, right? Or force. And we talked about the force of good. We didn't need another force for building that said, look at me, see me. We needed buildings and spaces that talked about, we see the community, we see the people. And we see that we are in service to them and that we are, and our communities are fractured and those stories are being lost and erased. I'm not going to say the building that erased a huge story, but that's why the people piece was really, really important. And for us to show up as who we are, we have to remove our egos first and do the work of good for the people and our neighbors. That's what we were, I think, immediately all kind of aligned, and we talked about buildings that had to be both and not either or.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to pick in on the what you said about optimism and kind of lay that on a little bit thicker, if you'll allow me. I mean, seeing the news that's coming out of the States as a European is like, it would be an easy time to sort of become cynical and say, okay, it's going to be more developer driven. Architecture isn't really even a recognized profession anymore if we have to understand that. And like the situation that architects work in the US is really not ideal. I think there's a lot of code that is a bit old. There's a lack of ambition in certain layers of governments. There's money that is in the wrong places. Like these are not ideal circumstances, but never in this jury have we sort of been apologizing for this and saying like, okay, but it's the best they could do, or it's good enough given the context. We've always been very demanding, and I think ultimately, many times we put the selection that we had so far on the table and said like, okay, if we look at these projects as a selection together, what is the story that we're telling as a jury? Like, what are we signaling here? And the optimism for me is exactly there in the fact that actually architecture can make a difference. It's as simple as that in a way, but what we are trying to show is that good architecture, whether it is making an excellent structure that is future-proof and is going to be able to be adapted and cared for over multiple generations, whether it is an attention for the people who maintain and care for our parks, at whatever scale it is, architecture can make a difference. And I think that is an ultimately optimistic kind of reading of the situation of the profession today.
Thank you. Well said. I know. That does allow me to preview the winter issue of Oculus, which is focused on advocacy in the profession. And I was mentioning to Jesse and the jury that we made a call for op-eds like we always do in the magazine. And this one called for architects to discuss their work, where their work overlapped with advocacy or their own passions. And the response that we had to this call for op-eds was just many hundreds of % more than we ever get for other calls for op-eds in the magazine. It was just gave me a huge feeling of optimism to see the breadth of responses, the type of work people are doing, many people working in housing, but many other categories as well that, consider workers in the city or people living near data centers, many areas. So it's nice to be able to end on that optimism note. I think maybe instead of doing questions, the jury could make themselves available to talk with folks after. But I usually like to end by just sort of allowing you to issue a sort of challenge to people entering the design awards next year, sort of how to raise the bar, how to think about their entries, what kind of projects the next year's jury will be able to see. So I'll maybe let you go one at a time or however you want to handle it.
I think I can answer that really literally and then maybe a little bit less literally. One thing we're really looking for and excited to see unfold over the coming years, I think we've seen a lot of policy changes and regulatory changes to make way for office to residential conversions. We see a lot of market need and opportunity there. And so there's tons of space and room and need for great projects there. And I think we talked a ton about the really critical challenges that need to be solved in that area. So I think we're looking for and excited to see what happens there very literally. And then I think, the projects that really spoke to us this time let us see into the heart and the design thinking of the work. We spoke about the optimism and opportunity there, but some of the projects really story told the submission in a way, I think, of the terminal warehouse, where we could understand the significance of that building on that site, on fill, as part of a bigger story of the city and its own history of manufacturing and industry, as well as the view of the building from the High Line. So I think the projects that give us a glimpse into the heart of the design thinking is really important because, again, that ties us back to the people and to the role of architecture in making.
I think that's really beautifully spoken, Bree. The one thing that really I looked for again and again and again was not mass timber, but I did appreciate it. But it was really the element of research. I mean, we are all in this major time of we needing to make change in our profession. And it takes a lot of work to change a paradigm from 20th to a 21st century architecture. And I've said that, it sounds like a cliche, but it is not. It is hard work, hard research, developing new systems. And we just want to know that. We want to know that you've done that, you're doing that, this is how you interpret what that means. we looked at many beautiful projects, formally beautiful. I was educated in that system, formal project after formal beauty after formal beauty, and we did not say yes to those projects. The projects that we said yes to were projects that took us out on adventures into new levels of knowledge and achievement. And I'm really thrilled to see what you're all going to do next year.
I was going to just play off of what Bree had said, because I do think this issue of conversion is really important. And I know that, like, we reviewed a lot of really, market-driven stuff, okay? So I guess the challenge, maybe I would put it out to everyone in this room, for those market-driven projects and the clients that you have, the city does an amazing job of forcing the kind of community interaction that created the Eliza and Inwood Library project, okay? But what I would say to you is, listen, do what you can to become more entrepreneurial in terms of creating those kinds of partnerships between nonprofits and your developer-led projects. There's a tremendous gap and a tremendous opportunity, I would say, in looking and being super creative in terms of inviting more people into a project that is market-driven, okay? There are pro formas that can work to invite nonprofits in the space they might need or the things they might need into those projects. And we didn't see enough of that. So I want to just put the challenge out there. Think more creatively. Think like you're working for the city when you're working for a private developer, and kind of flip the script so you're not just kind of servant architect. You're like, hey, we should be thinking more creatively. We should bring more people to the table because they deserve space too.
Well, I mean, from my point of view, there's really room for being a little bit more innovative from a material point of view. Like we're seeing mass timber being fairly adopted, but what about geosourced? What about other biosourced materials? I think, like, especially in the smaller projects or pavilion kind of pop-up things, that we should create rooms for experimentations there, because there's a whole world of clay-based materials, bio-based materials, natural stone, and so on to be discovered, reused on a component level. We're stuck on the building level at the moment. And can I just make a very quick shout out to whoever did the sustainability review codes? It's a committee here.
It is. It's the process for technical review.
That was really, really helpful to separate sort of the bullshit from the real intentions and the proven facts. So thank you for that.
Yes, every project before it gets to your eyes goes through the technical review process. So that's a huge, yeah.
I would say I talked about this very early on. If I see another mid-wood tone in a swooping element, I'm gonna vomit. We've seen it. It's been done. Color is culture. Color is heritage. How can we reimagine what it means to integrate color back into architecture and spaces without the whitewashing and the neutrality of it? I think that's been done. We've seen it. We don't need to see it anymore.
That being said, I think we all color coordinated very well tonight. Christiana or Jeff? Anyone else?
Yeah, apparently I was the best initial reviewer in terms of my generosity of scores, but so the Vermonter in me, I'm forced to be nice to everyone. No, I think, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground in terms of what we valued, in terms of what we felt was appropriate. And I touched on this before, of like just confronting the reality that we're in, being honest with what's valuable in architecture and what's valuable for us to give back to the world in this moment. So projects that focus on those sort of topics, I think, were resonating with us. And I think in the times we live in now, I think that is more and more important, to be very honest with yourself about exactly what the problem is we're trying to solve. On a more specific presentation level, I think, we had, 208 submissions. I think it's critical for someone putting together a presentation to think, what's the story that I'm telling and how can the story be told in a compelling and efficient way? I think a lot of the projects where we were forced to kind of dig in and figure out what the story was for ourselves then makes it so that you aren't in control of the narrative. So as a designer putting together a package for this or for a client or for anyone, I think a compelling narrative goes a long way. And just, it's so interesting for us to also know context and what's going on with this project. How did it come about? What's the problem it's trying to solve? So diagrams.
Yeah, this is more of a just kind of general thought about this year and maybe a kind of broader theme for the future. But I think one of the things that really connected all of the projects, and this word that I kept coming back to, was reverence. Reverence for the materials, reverence for the existing city, reverence for existing buildings, reverence for our institutions, the library in New York. What does that look like in the next 50 years? How do we integrate that better into our city? And so I think, that also probably relates to the narrative question there, is like really making it super clear, what did you really care about and what really mattered? Is it the community? Is it the material? How does all of that kind of come together?
I think we're done.
This has been great. Thank you all so much for your time and your thoughts, and for visiting New York. And congratulations to all of the winners again.
A really wonderful event in April, the Honors and Awards Luncheon, which will celebrate these winners, which is on April 24th at Cipriani Wall Street. There will be an exhibition opening here in early May, and the work will be shown throughout the summer, so you can see it in person here too. And then, of course, on AIANY.org. So thank you again for being here. Congratulations once more to all 24 winning projects, and hope you'll spend another 20 minutes with us before the Center for Architecture closes and get to talk to the jurors. So thank you very much.